Hi, everybody. So there were quite a few people out yesterday for class, either for illness or other reasons. And then this concept is a new one, so I want to make sure that you have the ability to go back over the notes, the process, because this really has to be done with fidelity by Tuesday for us to stay on track. So if you hear some crazy noise in the background, it's probably my dog snoring, just an FYI. First of all, we went through the writing prompt, and if you weren't there, you might want to go ahead and think about it. This led us to a discussion on effectiveness after we played with the matching of rhetorical techniques like we did on Tuesday. This was a much more difficult list of terms because nobody had gone over them yet, with the exception of metaphor, personification, and simile, which are normal, I would say, things for you to practice when you're younger. So I don't need you to memorize those terms. As I said in class, the important part is being able to recognize what a speech writer or a speaker is doing to prove his or her point. So if you can find those things, those techniques in the text while you're listening or reading it, then this list of terms can help you figure out what they're called. I'm going to post that under resources so you have the master copy of all the terms and their examples. So we then talked about our proposals briefly. I didn't have everybody read their summaries, but I did have you think about why you chose the speech you chose for your analysis, because if you don't have a decent reason for choosing it, I have a hard time believing it's going to be an authentic analysis that either you want to write or I want to read. So it's important that you pick one that you care about for some reason or other. For example, it could be because you like the speaker, like it's a president that you really like or interested in. It could be because you are interested in the event that prompted the speech, like civil rights act or a war that prompted a presidential speech, or some kind of social issue that you're interested in. A good reason to pick a speech is not because it's short. I know that's practical, but I will say to you that that's going to make your writing piece a lot harder because you won't have enough to write about. So we then talked about what makes a speech effective, because this is part of what you're going to have to do when you write your essay. So we came up with some version of all of these things across 3 classes that I taught this lesson yesterday. So I made a slide here with the answers that you came up with and then a couple that I added. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go over it. But the important part now is, how do you turn this work you're doing with SPACECAT, close reading, and analyzing to an essay? You have the assignment on Blackboard. It's under assignments. I made a new folder for writing assignment 2 that has the assignment details in it. But that doesn't help you for what you need for Tuesday. So the first step is to do SPACECAT for your given speech. So whichever one you pick, you do SPACECAT and you do it well. That, along with the proposal, will be turned in with the final copy of this essay. So it's not optional, even though I'm not putting points down. I'm checking it off as part of what you need to do to complete this assignment. Some people have already done that, so maybe you're adding to it, or you're ready to move on to the next thing, which is to create a thesis statement and an outline. So that's why I put this slide in here. Whatever you identify as the purpose in the speech is going to be the thesis statement. For example, if I said the purpose of Andrew Yang's speech was to unite the Republican and Democratic parties through the idea of a universal basic income called the freedom dividend. That is a thesis statement. You're making an argument that that's his purpose. We don't know what his purpose is. We can't ask him unless you know him and you want to call him up. So the point is, this is what you think the purpose is of the speech. You just don't say, I think. There's nowhere in this essay that you should be using the first person, the second person, or any collective nouns, or collective pronouns, sorry, like we, you, us, they. You can use they maybe, but not we, you, or us, and you're not using I, me, my. So you have to be objective, and this thesis statement is the first place that you do that. So take whatever you decide is the purpose or the argument given in the speech, the overall argument, and turn that into a one-sentence thesis statement. That's the first step. Then you're going to create an outline. So creating an outline is this. I've done the outline here for you, but you have to actually fill it in, or at least begin filling it in for Tuesday in draft format. So I don't want an outline. I want paragraphs. So it makes sense to me to try and get your thesis statement down. To do a little bit of research, you can have outside sources on this, but I suggest primary sources or reference resources such as Britannica.com to look up what's going on at the time that the speech was given. That might be a war you need to research. It might be a social situation with something like women's rights or LGBTQ issues. It might be 9/11. It could be anything that you need to look up just to figure out what was going on around the time of the speech, because you're going to need that information for context, which is part of SPACECAT, and then you're going to also need that for your introduction. And my dog is drinking water like he's never had any water in his life. Okay, just don't mind him. So you can craft your intro paragraph if you're comfortable with it, but you really need to get into those body paragraphs before Tuesday. What those look like, the process is you're first going to take the speech and divide it into 3 parts. That could be beginning, middle, and end. It could be chronological. It could be like in the past, in the present, in the future. You have to read your speech and figure out how it is divided. If you don't see anything in particular as an organizational feature, then you need to just chunk it into 3 sections. Your body paragraphs for the essay are going to be an analysis of each of those chunks. You might need more than 1 paragraph for each of those chunks, but the minimum is 1 paragraph per part of the speech. So, for example, if I'm going to say that Obama started in the past by talking about precedents with laws and policies in his second inaugural speech, and then he moved into the present and where he wants to go to the future for the country, then I'm going to say the first chunk is the past. He makes historical allusions by referencing founding documents for the country. He builds a little bit of credibility by referencing his own experiences. So personal anecdotes. And then he also uses repetition. So if those are 3 things I see in the first chunk, I'm going to talk about those and give examples of those. Try and figure out how those relate to the purpose, which is your thesis statement. And that is what each body paragraph will be like. You're not going to have 1 body paragraph for each device that you find. That is a very low-level analysis method. So instead, you're going to think, okay, well, in the first part of this speech, the speaker does these 3 things. Those are choices in SPACECAT, which are the rhetorical devices. And he does this because he's trying to show this or do this or have this effect on this particular audience. Then you give an example from the speech and you talk about it, explain it. It's not a summary. The only place you might have a little summary might be in the introduction. So if you get that done and you'd like to move on, the next part is a paragraph about appeals. So after you've looked at all the choices and figured out how the speaker used these rhetorical techniques to reveal the purpose or be persuasive, then you can say, well, throughout the speech, the speaker has built an emotional appeal. this is where the evidence of that is. Here's how that has this effect on the audience. That's what the next body paragraph. It might be the fourth paragraph. It might be the sixth or seventh. It depends on how many it takes you to do the body paragraphs for the rhetorical choices. And then you're going to speak to the effectiveness of achieving the purpose for the intended audience. So this is kind of the rest of SPACECAT. You might mention tone. You might mention, well, you're definitely going to mention audience. Who is the intended audience or audiences? Who are they? And then how does the speaker specifically do things to target those audiences and be persuasive? The conclusion, don't worry about right now. We'll talk about it on Tuesday. So your responsibility for Tuesday, the 18th, is to do steps 1, 2, and 3. You are to have half of the overall essay completed as a draft. So that can be the body, that can be the intro and one body paragraph, how much ever you think it is. But you're going to shoot for 1.5 pages typed, double spaced. You need to bring that to class, ready to go. I will check it off on Tuesday. If you have specific questions after you've listened to this, then you can send me an email.